Now, a couple of other things here. Oh dear, how do I put this? When I was taught history in school, and I really didn't think about it too much at the time, there was a kind of parade of politicians and generals. Now, I happen to study European history, so they were French and Spanish generals and politicians, but they could be American or they could be, you know. A lot of the history that traditionally was written tended to look at the experiences, and indeed the diaries and memoirs of what are sometimes called the great men and significant events. And what oral history does, at least potentially if well used, is it starts to give voice to the kind of people who didn't write memoirs, I mean, people in public life think, I'm in a very important position and people are going to want to read later about why I made the decisions that I made, what I was thinking when I signed the treaty, or what I was thinking when I declared war, or what I was thinking when I introduced this legislation. So they write it all down, okay? Very pompous thing to do. Most of us, though, go through life thinking, I don't think anybody's really going to care, about me and what I did in my life, why should we bother about that? So a lot of history has ignored the experiences of ordinary people. It's talked mostly about men, it's talked mostly about white men, in fact. And so the potential in the interview is to give voice, shall we say, and I mean I don't use that in too pompous a sense, to the sort of people who have been ignored in traditional histories. So let's think a bit about it, okay? If you're doing interviews, what kind of groups of people do you think you might be interviewed that might be ignored, might have been ignored in the histories, the national histories or the state histories that you would have read? What kind of groups can we give voice to that wouldn't, what sort of people don't write things down? Children, very good, excellent, yeah. I mean, children are children, okay? Yeah, there's some really interesting work being done now with interviewing children and their members. Yes.
Teenagers.
Teenagers, yeah. Okay, absolutely, yeah. What other groups? Women in general, and certain groups of women, especially working class women. Yeah. What others?
Servants. People who were getting breakfast for lunch.
People, yeah. People, working class people in general. Okay. So now you can argue here. This is social history, okay? That these are the kinds of experiences that are much more representative than what those generals and those politicians did. But you're only going to get at this if you interview people, because, most of the people you've been talking about, don't consider their own humble lives important enough that they're going to write about it. A few will, I mean, and there are famous historical examples, the mill girls of Lowell, etc., who wrote things down. But, in most cases, no, that experience is not part of history. You've got to use oral history techniques to get to it. This takes 2 clicks, there we are. Okay, so this is what oral history is good at. Social history, labor history, union workers, family history in general. And that is, I think, really a growing area of interest to a lot of people. How do gender relations change? How does the division of work in the home change? Okay, or not change, as the case may be. What's the impact of kitchen technology? I mean, there are all sorts of interesting things here that you will probably not get in the written records. Changes in the status of children. The other area that I would point out here is that there are some societies where history has always been carried orally in the collective memory. Anybody got any examples of that? I could have put them on here, but that would have given you too many clues, wouldn't it? Yes. Native American. Yeah, Native American would be an excellent example. Yeah, I mean, there certainly is some written Native American history, but generally the history is collective and it is carried forward by certain leaders in the community. Any other examples here? We can think internationally here. Yes?
The African?
Yes, excellent, yeah. Yeah. Do you know what the name is for the traditional storyteller in West Africa? Have you heard that word? Oh, it's a fun one to remember. Yeah, in West African countries, and I mean in many other African societies as well, but in West Africa, the person's called, it's a French word, a griot. You can impress your friends by saying, oh, do you know about the role of the griot in Côte d'Ivoire? Okay, these are people who, in their societies, are the keepers of history, as in Native American societies. And it's only kept orally, okay? They didn't write it down. It's passed, from this group to this group, and it is recited orally at community gatherings. So, good luck in finding a lot of historical documents about things that happened in West African societies hundreds of years ago. They aren't there. This is why, unfortunately, when the colonial powers came in, they started writing stuff down. But believe me, history did not start in 1810 or whenever the British or the French took over this piece of land. Was there another example? Yes.
Buddhist history only used to be oral. They wrote it down eventually. Buddhism.
Which one? Buddhism. Okay, excellent. Yeah, yeah. Many Asian societies, many religious traditions, are just carried orally. Very good. So let's face it that written history is part of the picture, but it can't count. This is not so good for political, diplomatic, military history, that sort of thing. It can be done. You can go interview the generals and politicians if you like, but these would really be the areas where I think it's the most powerful. I describe this in sort of three ways, three purposes here. Documentary, to describe people's experiences, events, and sometimes their skills. Interpretive, to find out what's important in people's lives and what's the relevance of it. And the third is a more, should we say, radical suggestion here. A lot of oral history, some oral historians come from a Marxist background, and they believe that there's a very important role for oral history to promote public dialogue within a community, which can lead to change. And this could be dialogue on something like, the history of development in the community. Why is everybody having to leave the community? Because the rents are going up, So there's often this kind of social purpose twist to it. I want to pause a moment here and talk a little bit. We'll get back to the issue of memory and the interpretive here. There's one of the problems with oral history is, what sort of things do you think people have trouble remembering exactly?
The younger years?
Well, yeah, sometimes. But what kind of historical facts, if you like, do people have trouble remembering? Names, dates. Okay, right. Yeah, I'm not quite sure when this happened to me. It was 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Okay? Now, so oral history is not very good at doing that. Yes?
If through oral history, how like stories are passed through people, don't they usually just change?
Oh yes, they begin to change, don't they? Yeah, and that's one of the great criticisms of oral history, that people will, change the stories as they go along, okay? Now, but you've actually come right to the point I want to make.